All right, all right, all right. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna, and you don't know already. I pray everybody is doing well. Given that this is a Friday evening, we're gonna pick up with Amy and Marcus on the other side, the top side of the week, right? So give thanks for your patience and that one. But while we were taking a little break, I kind of wanted to touch on some toxic family traits because, again, I was feeling some toxicity in the situation, and I know you were too. And so many of us who have this type of experiences often in the beginning don't really understand what we're experiencing. We kind of know that this is what it is, but we don't understand what it is, right? Or those who have experienced toxic relationships, toxic families, and it could be troubling, right? Because you grow up in something, so it's actually normalized, but you don't know how healthy or unhealthy it may be, right? So with that said, I'm just going to go over this a little bit more. If you watch some of my older videos, it's what I like to call Soulonomics. Right? It's things that deal with the soul and help us to kind of get a handle on our own realities, because oftentimes we can see the issues that may arise in other people's lives, but when it comes on to our own life, we may be too close to the situation to really get a grasp on it. So like I said, we're definitely going to jump back into Amy and Marcus in a second, but just like I did the health video a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to touch on something of this nature. So I'm going to read a little bit from an article and kind of talk about it. Again, I'm not going to stay long. This article is 9 signs you were raised in a toxic family. And once again, sometimes when our families are the only ones we know, we just normalize certain type of behaviors. But if you are a black sheep or someone who has kind of come to, quote, like people say, break generational curses, then you may have always noticed that you may not think the way that everybody does or move the way that everybody does. And that kind of would have made you the single person, the person who was on the outside looking in. Even though you were a part of this cluster or this soul unit, you never necessarily felt at home, right? So this may not be for all people, but this is for to whom it may apply, right? And so I just felt led to share this today, and so that's why I am doing it. So the article goes on to talk about arguments and the occasional disagreement in the family. So, one of the ways that you can tell that the family or the communication style in the family is toxic is the way that people disagree. So, not agreeing is normal. People are going to have points of contention that they don't agree, right? However, if it says if you're always felt like you become your worst self when you're back at home, your family could be treading on toxic territory. So you could be like all well adjusted, you could be out here taking walks, you could be in here deep breathing, eating all your veggies, but the moment you go back into this family unit, you become the worst version of yourself, or you're triggered into becoming the part that you have been working on. It may be that the environment is bringing you back into that space because of the familiarity. Toxic people are draining. So if you come into contact with people, or if you have in times past, and just even being there, the person, when you're done, you just feel tired. Like, bro, I don't want to talk. I don't want to do nothing. That means that you may have come into contact with a toxic person. And it doesn't always present itself like the person is over the top, the person is yelling and screaming. It can also be the flip side, that you have to continually lean into that person. The person is the interrogator. You have to become the interrogator because the person is aloof. One of the first books I wrote, and I'm like, how much book of moon I wrote? Actually, I started writing nonfiction. One of the first book outside of Angry Black Woman that I wrote is Soulonomics 101, right? And so I wrote that book because of this. So if you be like, if you met me because I'm talking about Bob Marley, or if you met me because I'm talking about Marcus Garvey, or you met me because I'm talking about different things. People have come into contact with this channel at different stages. And at some stages, I would concentrate it on other things more heavily than I would and other stages. So just to let you know, like, oh, is she flip flopping? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So before I go, sometimes, you have to be like, let me reintroduce myself. I haven't. So this is a book that was written, and just so that I can reintroduce myself, right? To why I feel led to cover this, especially when we're talking about the toxicity that we're experiencing even in the Marcus Garvey story, right? And I'm like, man, this is triggering me to go back into Soulonomics time. You know what I mean? So this is a book. If you look on the timestamp on the book, it says 2016. See that? March 19th, 2016. And that's me, Amuna. Soulonomics, a DIY guide for soul improvement. And this book kind of explores some step-by-step things that one could do as they're going through this process. So no, it is not out of my wheelhouse for those who may be like, well, on there, well, on there, well, on there. Well, I'm not talking about, no, it's not out of my wheelhouse. It's just, I guess, a combination of things that made me remember, you know what, let me bring this back into this conversation. So in the case of Marcus, we saw that some toxic family traits were in his family with the way his father behaved. And we see that he then adopted it into his own personal household when he grew up. And then we see Amy Garvey complaining about the ways in which she felt he treated her, right? And so that's how toxicity really goes from one generation to the next. People oftentimes internalize it, they normalize it, and then they express it into the current situation that they are in. So until we, the people who are actually experiencing it or are the propagators of this type of behavior, until we come to terms to realize, yeah, this is off. If we never think this is off, then we're going to continue said behavior. So I just kind of wanted to qualify the conversation a little bit to let you know, like, I think this was like the second book I wrote, which was Soulonomics. So let's continue. So you get into contact with the person and you feel drained. Also, you may feel emotionally wiped out. Like if you avoid somebody because you don't have the bandwidth, it may be you, that you have too much debris, too much energetic debris, too much emotions unresolved that you haven't processed. So it's not always the person is draining you. In that sense, it may be that you not willing to process the things, or it may be the person draining you. So sometimes when we go over this stuff, people are like, yes, it's everybody else. And that's what I've been saying this whole time. But in actuality, there's a possibility it can be a combination of both. Now, once again, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but I've studied this and used it to help me in my own personal walk as well as others. And so I just share this information. Let's continue. Time with them is about taking care of their business, which will lead you feeling frustrated and unfulfilled, if not angry. Don't allow yourself to become depleted as a result of giving and getting nothing in return. So in these type of relationships, oftentimes, if it is abusive, there is no reciprocity. Lauryn Hill sung about, can she get some reciprocity, right? Allow me. And if you listen to the X Factor song, it's about a very toxic relationship that she's really contemplating how she got into. And she's really, let me explain myself. It's somebody who you're talking to who's bent on misunderstanding you, right? In these toxic relationships, really, it's not about who you as the person, you who are as the soul. It's what you represent in the mind of the person. So oftentimes they won't let you be your true authentic self. They won't hear you, empathize with you, meet you where you are. It's sometimes shutting you out so that they can then project onto you their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Okay. So welcome to those who just joined us. Let's continue. It says here, there are 9 signs that this particular article goes into. The name of the site is Pure Wild. As always, I will share it. And this, there's some experts in here. We have Abigail Brenner, who is a board certified psychiatrist in a private practice. And we have Darlene Lanza, a relationship and codependency expert. And why codependency is important, because usually if you grow up in a toxic family unit, then you're going to have people who have not necessarily narcissists, but you may have the aggressor. They may have narcissistic tendencies. They may be the one who the household is taking the cue from. And then you will have the people who learn to cope within that structure. Now, the issue with this is that it extends beyond the home. It goes beyond personal relationships. This same people who are at home are also in jobs. They're also out in the community. So you meet the same energy beyond the house. You meet them in the school. You meet them in the community. You meet them on your job. People are people, and people make up society. So this type of stuff is important to learn because, again, it primes us or primes children for what to accept as they go forward. So this person is a person who is they coach individuals for over the last 30 years, and she is also an author. So both persons are authors and they are proficient in their field. So let me share this while I'm reading it. And a lot of times we don't want to hear this, like I said, because it's easier to, which we can learn from other people's experiences. And I'm all for learning from other people's experiences. But every so now and then, more now than then, we need to look in the mirror and see ourselves and see whether or not we're part of the problem or whether or not we're part of the solution, right? So you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. So again, like I said, let's just continue really quickly and then we're going to move forward. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel says your channel is awesome. I've been following you since your review of the Bob Marley. I'm not always in the chat, but I always tune in. Give thanks. Thank you for tuning in. And like I said, I share as I'm led, and sometimes even in reading, sometimes even in interfacing with the information, if we don't process it, sometimes we may be inclined to transfer it from what we're reading into real life. So this is why you see me taking a step back a second to make sure that I'm processing the information and not necessarily transferring it, because that could also be dangerous too. We are learning history, but we are also opening up a host of emotions, feelings, and all kind of things. So even with the Bob story, a lot of people identify with it because it was familiar, right? And so we did see some toxicity in that conversation. Shalom, brother Uzziah. You know, we getting ready to wind down, but I said let me share this really quickly. So welcome to the conversation. So one of the things of a toxic family unit is they get jealous or try to compete with you. So you may have this in a father to a son. You may have it in a mother who always wanted to be XYZ, and now the child is coming along and they're flourishing in that way, and they may sabotage the child. They may try to compete with the child. You have mothers today who had the children very young, especially if it's a daughter. You see it a lot with mother and daughter relationship where they may compete with the child to kind of relive what they didn't particularly live. So that is also something to be mindful of. And it may not be the parent to the child. It can also be the parents could be jealous of one another. One may be jealous or could be jealous of the other person's status or the other person's progress or whatever it may be, or the person's personality. They may be one that can go into a crowd and interact, and the next one may be a recluse. Who knows? And so jealousy can arise for so many different things. Really, jealousy is about desiring something that belongs to someone else, right? And so because there's jealousy and then there's envy, but that's another conversation for another day. But for the sake of this conversation, you covet or you desire that which belongs to somebody else, right? And so that even within sibling rivalry, which is what jealousy and this type of things often is based on, competition, that's a sign. Now, it's not like, oh, you're jealous, toxic relationship. No, it has to be persistent and continuous for you to be like, you know what, this definitely is a sign that something is not right. Another sign that was written is they overreact, right? So things that should have been small, things that should have been able to sit down and deal with and to have a conversation about, there is always like this big blow up. So this is the family unit that, and it could be the big blow up or the great withdrawal, right? Where like there's big yelling and screaming and contention, or it can be where they ice you out and there's a whole silent treatment, because that's the flip side of that, right? That because you didn't do what I wanted you to do, because you didn't comply, then I'm going to just ice you out, right? So it's a breakdown essentially in communication about whatever may have happened in the house. Okay. And again, this is not only for house. You could be, greetings and welcome to the conversation. You can be the covetous spirit. Yes, Uzziah, the covetous spirit is the root of jealousy. It's coveting, desiring that which belongs to somebody else. Absolutely agree. Right. So for those who just joined us, we're going over 9 signs. As you could tell, I'm a little traumatized. It's like, I'm gonna go back to Amy and Garvey. I'm like, help me, please. So I said, let's go over some stuff, some takeaways, things that we could definitely take home and be mindful of. And again, this is not just in the at-home family unit. You could be at work, and this type of environment happens at work, where the jealousy happens at work, the blowing up happens at work, right? All of this stuff can be in your outing, in your people group, in your friend group. There's a lot of people who join friend groups that mirror the relationships from their original pattern. The original pattern that we get is from the family, right? These are the original cast members, and everything else becomes this reboot of the original cast members. If we think about it like that, what happens when you cast something? When you cast something, not like casting a die, but when you casting something, you're hardening it, you're cementing it, right? So the original cast members is the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, the granny, whomever. These are the original cast members, and they're the ones who we first, when each child looks at the mother, looks at the father, you say mama, or you say dada, or you say whoever the brother is, and that is what is in our subconscious minds. When we think about this word mama, we thinking about that face. When we think about brother, we thinking about that face. When we think, you understand? So this is the original cast members, and what happens when we grow beyond the original cast members, oftentimes we attract into our friend group, we attract into our external relationships people that mirror the peoples that we originally came in contact with. And the issue becomes, if it's problematic and if it is toxic, then we are going to continue to live and relive this toxic loop until we take stock, until we step back and realize, wait a minute, maybe I am playing into this because I keep casting the same people. It's like it's like somebody's redoing a show, but now it's on Broadway. So there's already a thought, like Little Mermaid. Why did it cause so much upheaval? Because they're like, no, wait a minute. According to the movie, the Little Mermaid is redheaded, a European, Eurocentric girl who looks like this. So when you try to recast it without the people's permission, they went off the meat rack. Like, hold on, you don't get to do this. That's kind of what, on a macro scale happens on the micro scale, if that makes sense. But let me continue for the sake of time. It says here, they compare you. So the first two was they get jealous or try to compete with you. The second is they overact. The third, they compare you. So usually that you and your older sister, they compare you to their friend's daughter, their friend's son. They compare you to all kind of stuff to kind of not see you for who you are. Because again, we live in society, we live in the world. So you're not going to totally escape the art of comparison. But when it gets to the point where you are not you, except if you're compared to somebody else or such and such, even in a relationship, oh, my ex didn't do that, or such and such didn't do that, or there's always this comparison, not acknowledging who you are in the present and trying to compel you to be someone else. That's also something that can contribute to toxicity. Now, these things in itself are not toxic. A little bit I step back from these type of conversations because I realized over the years we love our buzzword. We love our buzzword. Narcissist, narcissist, codependent, codependent. Like when we get our word, we just run with it. and the work that needs to be done, like everybody's not a narcissist, bro. People have narcissistic tendencies, but to say that you're a narcissist, that's another level, right? And so what happened is, it's good that a lot of this information has come into the populace, but it also becomes bad because it's overused, and in some cases, the information is being used to absorb the person of responsibility, so that they can look outside of them and point to everyone else about being the problem. It wasn't my fault. The person was a narcissist, right? Number 4, they play the victim, right? And so Sometimes it can be the parents playing the victim, the parents or the caretakers playing the victim, but not necessarily wanting to take responsibility for the part that they played. And then it jumps from aggressor to poor me. It's not my fault because, and then you begin to go on this long merry-go-round about why it's not you because when you were two and all of this stuff like this. There are plenty of us that things have happened to you in life, throughout life, but then you get to a point where you get to make the choice whether or not you're going to repeat some of these things that have happened, or are you going to live and make a difference, make a change. Now, it is not the easiest thing to model a behavior that you did not have the advantage of experiencing on the other side. I'm not here to say it's easy. It's not. Is it impossible? No. But is it easy? No, because you will be tempted to be like, wait, hold up. Like for children who grew up, and their parents had to work and then through the latchkey kid generation, and they had to learn that the people from Generation X are on the computer now comparing themselves to the generation, the millennials, and be like, y'all are weak. Why? Because they're saying to themselves, I didn't have that opportunity. But what also is happening is through that comparison, you try to correct some of the things that you wished was done for you, and in so doing you overcompensate on the other side. And that's kind of why we're seeing a lot of what's happening in not only just millennials but the next generation after millennials, is because the parents feel indifferent about what happened to them, and so they're trying to take those corrective measures and they're overcorrecting. It's like if you have on braces, after a point your teeth become overcorrected if they don't take the braces off in time. Right? So yes, your teeth may be crooked. You had it on for 2 years. Now is the time to take off the braces. You don't take off the braces, boop, it's overcorrected. So you can overcorrect the problem. And right now, the problem is being overcorrected, right? Which can also be toxic. You know what I mean? It also can be toxic too. So playing the victim is another one of the signs that possibly, and it's not just one time. Again, these things are pervasive. These things are all throughout. This is the go-to. And we see a lot of people modeling it, especially from the Caribbean and Africa, where they're doing the parent videos and making fun of the way in which basically it's like therapy through drama, right? So we think it's funny, but what they're doing, it's therapeutic in the way because it's allowing to model the trauma that you experienced, but in a way that is bringing, because it's so familiar really with a lot of people, it's kind of bringing this release and you're able to laugh and kind of deal with it in that way. But a lot of the parents, because they themselves didn't necessarily get the information or get the attention that we are seeking from them, then they don't have it. Right? So it's like, will you ask me for that? For me, never even one shoes and half a socks me used to wear. And you know what I'm saying? That kind of extreme. Or I didn't do that. It's an extreme. Take personal responsibility and acknowledge when you step on somebody's toe or this something is off. It's not the easiest thing to learn to recreate healthy relationships, but like I said before, it is doable. It does take work though. They don't respect your boundaries. This is a big one. Now today, and I'm gonna come read the comments section in a minute, you have a lot of people saying that they're establishing their boundaries, and by doing so, things that used to be okay are no longer okay. Right? And because that's breaking even the toxic family unit or the toxic workplace, like that's above my pay grade. A few months ago or years ago, there was a video circulating when the guy was like, yo, that's above my pay grade. Like, I'm not doing that, because the expectation is you shouldn't have any boundaries. You work here, so I should be able to do all these things, require all these things of you. And no, I'm not going to pay you anymore. So when you start taking back your space and saying, no, this is what I'm paid for, this is what I show up for, and establish boundaries in the workplace, it becomes a problem, right? You also have that same thing within the family unit, where it is that because you have been taught, depending on the nature of the family unit, like I said, that all toxicity does not look the same. You kind of have to know what it is that you necessarily are accustomed to. But in the sense of, if it is one where it's over the top and it's always in your face, then your boundaries lessen and lessen, right? So somebody may not feel like they're transgressing your boundaries. They may have making demands of your time, of your energy, of your resource, or they may violate you, disrespect you, do all kind of things and still expect you to show up, because they're not respecting you and they're not respecting your boundaries. They're not respecting you as a person. Or you may be the person. You may be the person that doesn't respect boundaries. This is not always about them, because the individual, we the people, may be the ones creating the or recreating a toxic environment that we grew in, right? So it's also to be mindful that it's not always looking out and saying, you know what, you're creating the toxic environment. The reality is, if the toxic environment happens at work, and if it happened at school, and if it happened in the friend group, and if it happened, then it may be you, because you're the constant everywhere that this thing is reoccurring. Possibly. Number 6, they're always right. So if you deal with a person that is always right and never wrong, that is to show you that that person is not necessarily self-aware, right? The person is not necessarily self-aware. I think I saw something in passing when the mother is saying, oh, you should listen to her because she's always right. And I'm thinking, huh? What person isn't? That means you're infallible. That means you never said or did anything incorrect or wrong, right? That is problematic, because the person is not able to see themselves, and thereby they won't be able to see you either. So a person who's always right, never apologize, never wrong, never come to terms, that is signs of toxicity. They give ultimatums. I'm just reading the overview, and again, if you read the article, they're giving their own examples, but I'm just flowing right now. If they're always setting ultimatums, if you don't do this, then I'm gonna do that. If you such and such, and then I'm gonna do this. Instead of giving people don't really necessarily understand the best to ultimatums, right? People tend to like to do that in relationships as well. If you have to compel someone in that way to women do it, men do it. If you this, and I think even Marcus Garvey's according to, he gave her conditions. Some people like, I didn't give you an ultimatum, I gave you a condition. But he said she had to stop drinking and stop talking to Cumberbatch, and that she violated. So, that would mean that she didn't really want to stop talking to Cumberbatch, and you should have considered that, right? So ultimatums is kind of it can be a blowback, because people may agree with you only because of XYZ. And the moment they get to where they're going, that's not what they really wanted to do in the first place. Conversations are always about them. Number 8, you're talking to somebody and the conversation is all about them. And it's not just one time, like it's saying, something happened in the person's life and they're talking about it, X, Y, Z. But it's if they're always bringing it back to them, it's always about them. Then again, this goes back to self-awareness. It may be a reason for it. This in and of itself is not necessarily, but it can get toxic if it's always about them, right? So you would have to know that. The person says, particularly if she accuses you of not caring about her, if you try to sift the conversation to yourself. Yo, that's funny. Number nine. And then it goes on to how to move on, which is interesting, because a lot of people oftentimes try to say, this is what happened, but then they don't give any solutions. Number 9, again, as it was in the beginning, they drain your energy. After talking, you don't feel invigorated. After talking, you feel drained. And usually this is an exchange that does not have reciprocity. And if this is an ongoing exchange, it's not like you go outside and I'll just say this happens to me often. Sometimes I gotta, It just happens to me all the time. I could go anywhere. I could go to the supermarket. I can go anywhere. It doesn't matter. I could go to the library. People just walk up to me and just start telling me everything. I promise you. And I sometimes I'm looking like, like I don't know what it is. They just, hey, how are you? They start talking to you. So one particular situation, I went to the library. True story. A lady called me over. I'm like, hi, how are you? She's like, hello, can I ask you a question? She asked me a question. One question led to another question. It led to me her telling me all about her life. So I sit there and listen. That's a one off, right? That's a one off. Somebody wants to talk about whatever's on their mind. That's a one off. But if the person is always doing this, always bringing it back to the same point, and sometimes it's because they're stuck. What I've found is that this draining of energy is because there is a blockage within them, right? And them talking about it and going and touching the same point over and over means that they themselves have not processed it. And so they're using you as, or you're using them, if you're the person who keeps revisiting the same thing, as a sounding board. But there isn't a real course of action. There isn't a real way for get to point A to point B. And one thing that agitates me to no end, I don't know about you guys. If anybody know me, like offline, if all right, we're gonna talk about this thing, and we're gonna talk about this thing again. But you see, if we don't really have no solution, and you see if we don't have nowhere forward, and you see if we don't have no plan, and you see if we don't have nothing for say, look, we said this, and now what are you doing towards moving to what you could do? Nothing no get me annoyed more. I'll listen. As that's why I always drop the link in the box. I'm willing to listen and hear. But I realized over these years of being in this space and opening up to hearing what people have to share, and especially not in this capacity, but like people's personal business, is that sometimes they don't want to move forward, or they don't even really want solutions or answers. They just want somebody to hear them out. So that exactly is one thing, but we're talking about toxic families. So this in itself, somebody may drain your energy because they're coming with a lot of toxic things. You know what I'm saying? But that doesn't mean that the person themselves is bad. It means that they possibly may have unprocessed information or energy that, or storyline, whatever they need to process, that now anytime you come into interact with it, because it's so draining to them, when you connect to their story, it drains you. You understand what I'm saying? Just the other day, I was in the supermarket, wholly minding my business. Great, yeah. We're gonna come back on the other side. No worry. Today is a short day for me, so we're gonna come back on the other side with a reading. But since the reading was so toxic, I wanted to talk about toxicity today. The other day, I was in the supermarket, and this European lady just walked up to me, like I said, out the blue. I'm picking up water. Lady walked right up to me and start talking about her neighbor and how her neighbor was intentionally keeping her up, and if she could just pow the neighbor. So at this point, she got my attention, because usually I just try to keep it short. So I'm like, yo, I said to her, you could do that, but you're gonna go to jail. And then she looked at me buck-eyed like I was bugging. Hello, you just walked up to a random stranger and started talking crazy. So I says to her, hey, have you tried talking to them? She says, no, I know they're doing it on purpose. There's no need for me to talk to them. They're doing it on purpose. I said, if you haven't talked to them, how do you know? That's what she said in the water aisle at the supermarket. I promise y'all. If I tell y'all some stories, man. So my point is that she, if I allowed her to, just in that short interaction, she would have started draining my energy. But I just gave her the consequences of what she was proposing. And then she was like, maybe that will work for you, but that doesn't work for me. I said, you should try to stop calling the police. I wanted to say Karen, but I didn't. And you should try talking to your neighbors. Right? Now, I could see how that individual has some pre-existing issues, and that just by that little interaction, she very may be toxic. Right? And if she was in your household or in your family unit, you could see how her playing the victim, right, blaming others and doing a lot of toxic things that we saw on this list could contribute to her problems in a relationship. Before she communicates with them, She would rather call the police because she makes these assumptions. So that's how communication breaks down in relationships, because we make assumptions. So people may say, Amuna, why do you go through so much to get the truth? Why do you go so much? Why do you dig so much into these books or into information or whatever I'm doing for the truth? Because the truth has to be the foundation. And part of the miscommunication is that we are not seeking truth. We're seeking to how we feel. And this person feels this way and the other person feels that way. And then we attract, even in the household or in the environment, those who agree with our feelings, not the truth, those who agree with our feelings. So even in doing this research, any research, biblical research, anything, be prepared for your feelings to be hurt. Because what we thought may not be what it is. You understand me? I said, when we reading about, thank you, brother Uzziah, what we read about Garvey may not be what it is. We just learned yesterday that Garvey is not the one who said, look to the east for the coming of a black king. He repeated it. Now, somebody who's so vested in Garvey saying it because, and a lot of times we don't want to admit the truth because we have already built this house of cards. We've already built this domino, right? This whole house that if you move this, then everything else that I built upon it is going to be in question. And so now we start playing around. But there's an interesting directive in the Torah that says, do not add to or take away from it. It was talking about the Torah because it's telling us about man's inclination to add and take away, to kind of alter it and to what we want it to be. This is not just alteration. So the truth is the truth. So if you live in a family that does not value the truth, and this is about personality and emotions and who feels they're right and who feels this person is wrong, based on whatever it may be, that is space for toxicity to breed and grow. This is why you have the conversation of the black sheep, because usually this black sheep is the one who's going to ball it out and be like, no, the emperor has no clothes on. And be like, shut up. You know what I'm saying? Or that there is some toxic thing that we experienced, and then you have to, pretend that you're not seeing what you're seeing because it's making everyone else uncomfortable. That's toxicity, right? That's also true. Some people are beyond reasoning, but the reality is, if we are even building our own families, if you become the heads of your own families, this information is still important. If you're raising young children, this information is still important, right? Important. Right. So it's one thing. When you're the black sheep and you break out of a toxic construct, you still have to know how to rebuild. You still have to know how to purge and purify and come back again. You still have to be able to know to identify because there is carryover, and we need to be mindful of that. And teaching healthy communication is not something you can only say. It's something you model. And even in trying to model it, all types of energy comes up when triggered. So it's a process. I try to teach my children, hey, if your sibling steps on your toe, they did something you don't like, talk to them. Don't go to the next one and talk about them. So I carve out time to say, hey, this person stepped on your toe, call them, look them in their face, and respectfully, because you want to maintain the integrity of the relationship, respectfully speak to them about what they have done. But what happens is, when parents get tired of the quarreling and the complaining and the back and forth, sometimes that is not done. So what happens is, in this particular first exposure to this first casting call here, we learn this is how you deal with someone who doesn't agree with you. This is how you deal with communication. You go tell somebody else who has nothing to do with the situation so that you can get other people on your side. But you forgot you have a relationship with this person. Do you want to preserve it? You know what I mean? So, yeah, let me continue here for the sake of time. It says here, so let me go over that before I go forward. So the first one is, they get jealous or try to compete. They overreact. They compare you. They play the victim. They don't respect your boundaries. They're always right. They give ultimatums. Conversations are always about them, and they drain your energy. And this is why when you see holiday time come in this place where people are celebrating their holidays here and there, or whatever it is they're doing, some people, you'll see them take to social media. They don't want to go They don't want to talk because it triggers them, because instead of actually dealing with it, the idea is to distance yourself, and sometimes that's all you can do. They call it in the community, the health community, go no contact, right? But there's a go no contact because you haven't been able to get through, or there's a go no contact because you're avoiding accountability. Like I said, all of these things have double edges. People will be like, I'm going no contact. No, you're just avoiding accountability, especially if you are the offender. Like, oh, this is toxic, I'm going no contact. Nah, bro, you need some contact because you're the one who's causing the problem. And a lot of people don't understand, just because you disagree doesn't mean that it has to be the end of the relationship. So this is why you might see I always drop the link in the box. Even if you don't agree with me, respectfully, let's have a conversation, because that is how you're able to have discourse and move forward, in my estimation. But for the sake of time, let's continue. How to move on from a toxic childhood. Again, what did I just say? Go no contact, something, some space, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to write off or avoid your family. Detaching is an emotional concept and has nothing to do with physical proximity. This is what the relationship counselor said. It means not reacting, not taking things personally, and not feeling responsible for someone else's feelings, wants, and needs. A lot of transference happens in a toxic environment. And so what happens is the offender, the aggressor, what happens is that they transfer onto the what ultimately becomes oftentimes the codependent in that relationship. They transfer these negative feelings. So you start to feel, if you're that person, you feel responsible for how the person is reacting. How is that? Like, I can't feel responsible for how you're reacting, right? So what happens is you go outside and you embody and you take on, oh, I don't want to say this thing because I don't want to upset the person, so I don't want to tell them the truth because blah 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 blah. Because you've been taught that now, because their parent didn't have self-control or they couldn't control it down, you now become responsible for how they're going to react to you. It's again, it's too much on one side, it's a problem. It has to be a balance. I saw this little child that this week on social media beasting on his parent. No, I'm not gonna go to sleep. You're gonna, I'm like, whoa. So that's where you overcorrect. Like, I'm not even gonna correct this child. I don't want you to feel terrible, so I'm gonna gentle parent. Okay. You're gonna gentle parent this child into being a terror. So I'm not saying that anything, too much of anything in any extreme in this nature is not good, right? So yes, the response to that is learning to set boundaries. Now it's difficult because detaching in this very toxic environment, it takes a lot of self-control. Because what happens usually, you think they're not doing it on purpose, but they are. More times they are doing it on purpose. And so they feed off of, if you're in a toxic environment, they feed off of your reaction, because that indicates to them that they control you through your emotions. This is why governing your emotions kind of takes back your control, right? And so setting boundaries to people and learning to detach in a certain way means that you are now in control and not the abusive party in whichever way. Avoid triggers. That goes with the other one that we just read. Okay. So again, that's knowing how that particular person works, whether it's through snarky remarks, where it's through comparison, where it's through outward aggression, how you have to know how your toxic situation works so that you can know what triggers you. If you don't know what triggers you, then they can still control you. So this is a lot of self work. It's not as much what is going on outside of you as much as it is how it's affecting you so that you can get a handle on it. Now, this gray rock method is interesting because, again, who wants to live in that type of environment? It's not healthy because human beings were not meant. We are social beings who do better when, for the most part, we're able to work collectively to achieve our end goal, right? So a lot of this stuff is coping mechanisms because you individually may not be able to fix all that is wrong, and you won't be able to. But this gray rock method, if you haven't heard, They say it was discovered by Australian psychologist Nadine van der Linden. In a nutshell, it's a tool to prevent toxic people from escalating a situation. Act as boring, uninterested, and disengaged as possible, and toxic people will find it less enticing or exciting to try to manipulate you and choose another target. So basically, the gray rock is just to have this flat affect, disengaged, unbothered, and when they see it's no longer fun to poke the bear, they will slink off. That is if you have a certain type of person. That's why I say you have to know the tools that the abuser uses, right? It's really, you can't just jump off out there with this type of stuff right here. Keep a go-to phrase on standby. A go-to phrase. So dealing with a toxic family member is tough, and you never know what's going to set them off. The person is saying that's why you use a handy phrase. So like, you might be right. I have to think about it. Okay, something, and then eventually the person will get pissed off by saying, that's all you say, that's all you say, you might be right, okay, I'll think about it. You always say that and never come back. The reason that most of this happens and continues is because it is a feedback loop, right? And so understanding what is feeding the behavior, understanding when the behavior began, and what position you became, what player did you become? You understand what I'm saying? What cast member are you? When you begin to understand more about that, then you can deal with toxic family members, toxic family traits, as well as the toxicity wherever you may find it. So I wanted to kind of share that, only because I'm kind of decompressing still from all this toxicity between Marcus and Amy. But we definitely gonna come back and read. I have my book marked. So let me know your thoughts on that. Like I said, I'm not going to stay long today. I'm gonna come to the comment section, and then I'm going to wind up. Yeah, today, now, when I first started doing these studies, the internet didn't have all this information. And today, everybody is a mental health guru, a mental wellness guru, and a lot of it is book knowledge, it's head knowledge. Because when you go to implement this stuff, it's a different story. Right? It's a different game out here in these streets, right? And so it's a learning process, and sometimes you will be triggered, especially if you're still in the environment that the damage happened. So all of these things are to be considered, and oftentimes when you are exposed in this way, you manifest a toxic mate, right? Because you're looking for someone that's vibrating at the same frequency, even if it's subconsciously, that you experienced when you first were exposed to this type of information. Winter says people love copying words without actually understanding the full meaning. Ain't that the truth? This is also true. This is why if I don't know a word, I look it up. I ain't no shame in my game. Because why out here pretending and you really don't know? We live in a time where information is so abundant, yet so many people just run with the words they hear without taking the time to actually look up the meaning. And like I said, I agree. And we look up the meaning, we look up the story, we look up the word, we look up everything. Like, dang, Amuna's over there reading books. You got that right. Yeah, because why just keep repeating? One of the other things that I couldn't stand, the Willie Lynch letter, the Willie Lynch letter. I'm like, oh my goodness, if you bring up the Willie Lynch letter one more time, fam. One more time, because we like sound bites. We love sound bites for some reason. It sounds cool, and you just collect them like little Pokemon cards. Let me see what else. Yeah, the lady from the supermarket was doing the most. She just walked up to me and just started talking madness. I'm like, lady, yeah, you could do that and you would go to jail. And you're the one who's just calling police on your neighbors, and they don't even know why you're calling the police on them. I thought it was absurd. She was like, it may work for you, but not for me. I'm like, lady, you need to pray. Okay, get your life together. Can I finish getting my water? Let's see here. Yeah, you can embrace different opinions. That's why I usually put the link in the box. You don't have to agree. Yesterday there were many people who didn't agree. Amuna, they still think Bob is a prophet. They still think Marcus is a prophet. And all I'm saying is if we make certain statements, then let's define what prophet is. So we're on board with that. And then let us know what they prophesied. Because somebody's a prophet, what did they prophesy about? And did the prophecy come to pass? You know what I'm saying? And in what name did they speak when they were prophesying? All of these things are qualifiers. We can feel the person was a prophet, but it's like saying, I don't know if you guys remember years ago, there's a young boy in I think he was like in Fort Lauderdale. Homie rented an office. Tell me if you remember this. Homie got his little white doctor coat. Homie started taking patients and telling everybody he was a doctor. Who remembers this? And the reality is, he was no doctor. What was the qualifiers for him telling the people he was a doctor? He looked like little Doogie Howser. Who remembers this? I think it was in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, fake teen doctor. Here it is. Just weird stories. Just stick it. Let me see if this is him. So I say that to say we could say the person. Here he is. We could say the person was a prophet, but what qualifies a prophet? What makes a prophet? Now, in this case, somebody who's saying they're a doctor in this capacity, then they have to be board certified according to what you're claiming. Who remembers this guy? Just so I can make my point here. Who remembers? This is fake teen doctor, now 25, sentenced to prison for new South Florida scam. Remember, this same dude before, this was the older picture on the right. He had a picture, he was taking patients. By the time, hey, listen, he could have just went to medical school and called it a dub. A serial grifter who gained national infamy as a teenager when he impersonated a doctor to defraud a patient is heading back to prison after pleading guilty to stealing more than $10,000 from his employee. Malachi Love Robinson, 25, received a sentence of over 2 years and 4 months last week. So they caught him being fake doctor before, and Mr. Love come back again. This time, thieving people money. Okay? But when he came on the first time, it was all about how I didn't even know this second thing happened, brother. You added again. Here it was. The first thing happened in 2018. So I say that to say, yes, we can say that he could have said he was a doctor. I felt that Malachi was a doctor. But did Malachi have the qualifications of being a doctor outside of what he felt? At this time, this is 2016, he was 18 and he was released on bail. What's this here? Stop it. That time he was 18, okay, for impersonating a doctor. 18 years old, insisting he had a passion for helping people. He did nothing wrong, even though he faces serious charges for impersonating a doctor. He opened his own clinic, met with patients, and gave medical advice, all without a license to do so. So in this particular case, in some places you look at the original word for doctor and it means teacher, right? Then you have in other places where people now say, no, the doctor means that you're board certified, blah, 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 XYZ, whatever the case may be, right? So the capacity that he set it up, he led people to believe that he was actually a doctor. So in this case, when we say that we disagree and that people say they're actually a prophet, that's all we're asking. What qualifies them to be a prophet? What is a prophet? And are there any other qualifiers that we need to look for? In this day and age, a lot of people are coming and saying they're a whole lot of things. And this is why there's so much information and so many people still very much lost. Let me see here. Your lessons are truly therapeutic for the soul. I appreciate all your hard work. Thank you, Brother Uzziah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I people say I used to do a lot on Facebook, like Amuna, where have you been? Sometimes, I'm led to share and then it's there. Because beyond the words, we have to move through life, and life will bring up different lessons and hurdles that we need to overcome. And sometimes along the way, we just need to know we're not alone. Want to say smartphones don't open to smart people. Finding the origin. I mean, we can't do it with everything. We can try. There's so much we don't know. But if it's something that we're going to keep sharing with people, if it's something that we're going to, build certain things upon, then it does warrant us to investigate and to do our research. Greetings for those who have just joined in. See, Winter says she doesn't agree that anyone is a prophet. But then again, like I said, so that we're on a even playing field. What is a prophet, right? Jenny says that happens with white kids all the time. I don't know. I haven't seen that one. They don't put them in jail. They're sent to school and call them mysterious. I don't know how many European children have actually opened the practice and started taking patients. I don't know. Yeah, he could have just went to medical school, because if he was able to do, he has an MD, all the people, why not just go put in the work? I mean, what's really good? Even if you wanted to be a holistic doctor, something, don't let a good mind waste, brother. Well, maybe he'll come out of prison with he can go and do a little university. He can do some classes in there or something, because for him to he has an active imagination. I didn't know he got hemmed up again. He got hemmed up 18. That it was all over the news. I don't know if you guys. It was all over the news. It wasn't funny, but it was a little bit funny. Anywho, with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I think I put the link, but I don't see anybody clicking. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I wanted to share that. Hopefully it was helpful to someone somewhere. Make sure you pass it along. Click like and share, and each one teach one. Listen, you never know what somebody's going through. We may laugh, we may joke, we may smile, but people life is life, and we are going through what we're going through, right? And sometimes you just need a word of sometimes you need a word of encouragement. Oh, Father, give us this strength. So definitely, I am all rested now. We can definitely resume Marcus and Amy's saga and drama on our next video. So thank you for your patience. Everybody have a blessed everybody have a blessed day. Let me go ahead and play this little thing here. And I'm gonna go ahead and finish preparing and boogie. Which about this thing then? I can't play that one day because them keep on a try flag me for the little song. I gotta change the song on the Casa commercial. YouTube, boy, I tell you. Yeah, I don't know that jail. I guess because they're like, uh yes, you do the same too, Winter. I don't know. He's so bright that they should have just put him, he would have been done now. 25. If he's that bright, he would have done 4 years. He could have started college early, and he could have been on his almost finishing if he would have put that energy towards actually. Because what kind of doctor? I gotta go revisit and see what kind of doctor he said he was too, because that was funny though. I gotta see what kind of doctor he was perpetrating. But anyway, I pray everybody have a blessed day. And yes, I'm looking forward to getting back into this story as well. All right, let me go over here now. Everybody have a blessed day. Island Twist follows Jackie Brown, a young girl who finds herself head over heels for the new island boy at school in fresh outer yard, and Jackie has the fever. But as she navigates the ups and downs of her new crush, things quickly spiral out of control when her not so secret admirer becomes determined to sabotage her relationship. So check out the new novel Island Twist over on Amazon today. Now back to the story.